everybody. Praise the Lord. Top of the morning to you. First name's Doni, last name's Glover. In it to win it for the long haul, baby. Listen, I am so proud to share with you that today is the 20th birthday of BeMoreNews.com. And we're going to start it off right. We're going to go to the throne of grace. We have with us my dear God brother, friend, man of God, Bishop Kevia Elliott. Praise the Lord, Bishop.
Hallelujah. He's worthy.
Yes, he is.
Grateful for this opportunity. Thank God for the 20 years.
Yes, sir.
Let us pray.
Let us pray.
Gracious God, our Father, in your wonderful name, Jesus, we come and we thank you for who you are, whose we are. We're grateful for this day. We recognize you've made this day and called us to be glad and rejoice in it. We thank you for your servant and your child, whom you've chosen for this media ministry. We're grateful for what you're doing in and through his life. We thank you for Doni Glover, and we pray that you continue to use him, that he continue to challenge and charge, that he continues to report in a positive way, that there might be a positive change in our city. We thank you for his life, God, and we pray even now that all that he does is pleasing in your sight. Guide him and direct him even in this program today, that all that is said and done is pleasing in your sight. We give you the glory for these 20 years. We thank you for the survival. We thank you for the struggle. We thank you for the success. We even thank you for the setbacks that became setups for your kingdom and your work through him. We thank you for all things that you've done and all that you're going to do. In your wonderful name, Jesus. Amen.
You know, Bishop, I'll never forget that sermon you preached about your passion leading to your purpose, leading you to peace. You remember that sermon?
Sure do. Sure do. Yes, sir.
Well, thank God for our passions, and may we follow our passions, and may it lead to purpose and ultimately peace. Thank you for all that you do for the city of Baltimore, Bishop.
Amen. Be steadfast, my friend.
Unmovable. God bless you.
Much love.
Yes, sir. Peace. Now, we had another guest lined up. Is everybody with me? I'm kind of making sure we're on the right page today. Yeah, that's the right page. You bear with me, folks. Are you backstage? I may have sent you the wrong link. Well, look, I'm going to send you a link because I'm not sure. I'm going to send you, yes, link. Yes. We just started off with prayer with the Bishop Elliott. I don't know if you know Bishop Kevia Elliott. Okay, the link is sent. I'll wait for you on the inside. I'll be looking for you. Yes, sir. So Bishop Elliott is up there at the Lord's Church, 5010 Park Heights. He's my God brother. But more than that, he's anytime, Ms. Redmond. Doni, D-O-N-I, at BeMoreNews.com. And welcome to the broadcast. Bishop Elliott is up there at the Lord's Church, 5010 Park Heights, my dear God brother, true man of God. There we go. There we go. I got you now. Here's my big brother from another mother, the one and only, the Honorable. How you doing?
Thank you.
Snowden.
How you doing, my friend?
We have an hour show, if I could have you for this hour, but at the midway point, I just wanted to let you know, and I thought you would be perfect for this. Senator Shelly Hettleman will be joining us. She brought to attention the swastika that was painted out there, I believe in Pikesville, and she's going to be addressing that. And I know you've dealt with all kinds of issues like that before. We got a young man, Todd. I'm gonna send you the link because I want you to come on in. You know this young man right here?
I certainly do, Brother Todd. Very
I
good.
just met him on this show last week. Come on in here, Todd. Now, if he knows you, he's doing all right. He's doing all right.
Delegate.
Huh?
General Assembly. He's running for the House of Delegates.
I think he won.
No, he's the Democratic nominee.
Oh, okay. So it don't work like that down that part of the woods.
No, unfortunately not. In Baltimore City, if you win the primary, it's tantamount to winning the election.
It's not like that down there where he's in Charles County.
No, he's in Worcester County.
Worcester. That's how you pronounce it.
No, Somerset. Todd, is it Somerset County?
He's gonna be clicking in, I guess, momentarily.
He's in Pocomoke City.
Yes, he did say Pocomoke. You know, a lot of us urbanites here in Baltimore, we couldn't tell you where Pocomoke City is. Where is Pocomoke City? It's down south.
Right. Well, the same thing was true with Greensboro until Antoine Black was murdered, and suddenly became a front page news story. Antoine Black is the young 19-year-old black man who was murdered 2 years ago by the police department over there in Greensboro. And this morning, they just settled the case for $5 million and his wrongful death.
You don't know whether to applaud or cry.
You do both, because in this case, while it is obviously some form of justice for the family, when you lose your only son, your loved one, no amount of money can compensate for that. So, I think it's good that the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, a great shout out to Debbie Gion and Richard Potter, who were very much instrumental in making sure that this family got some form of justice.
Mr. Carl, how do you follow all of these stories?
Well, one of the things, Donnie, this gives me an opportunity, something Todd and I have been working on together. One of the things that we're doing that I think your viewers will be very interested in. If I ask people what is an Amber Alert, people automatically know that an Amber Alert is an alert that allows people to know instantly that a child has been abducted or kidnapped. That's an Amber Alert. People know that automatically. Well, one of the things we're trying to do is create what's called the Emmett Till Alert, so that no matter where you live in the state of Maryland, if you get an Emmett Till Alert, you will know that there's been some kind of hate crime that have occurred somewhere in the state of Maryland. And we expect to launch this in August. And what it will mean is that people who live in Worcester County, people who live in Howard County, Montgomery County, or Harford County, wherever they live, including Baltimore City, when there is a race incident that occurs, we'll be able to let them know about that instantly, so that we don't have just these isolated cases. We have a comprehensive view of what's going on. For example, Todd knows that in Salisbury, Maryland, at the end of the school year, a young white student walks into goes on social media rather, and indicates he's going to shoot up a school where black students are. Well, that got a lot of attention on the Eastern Shore, but many people on Maryland's Western Shore never even heard that this had occurred, right? They didn't know that the sheriff who investigated that complaint was related to a young man who allegedly committed the crime, or that his mother served on the school board. They didn't know that. So we want to make sure that kind of information is given out instantly, so that we know how to respond when we have these incidents. And by the way, there will be more of them. There will be a lot more racial incidents coming.
Why?
Donald Trump. there is a real effort on the part of white supremacists to create what they call, and they want, a race war. So they're looking for every opportunity they can to exploit any racial situation that could uh, turn into a race war, because they
What do they think it will accomplish? Especially, this is 2022. You got white women with babies by black men. You got black men with babies by white women. How's that going to work out?
it's called the Aryan Nation, the final solution. Um, that phenomenon is not new, what you just described. That's been throughout history.
Now, I just want to clarify. Now, my history tells me that mankind came out of Southern Africa, Namibia. The San Bushmen have the oldest DNA on Earth, meaning every race of man on Earth, every race of man and woman on Earth can trace their roots back to the San Bushmen of Southern Africa and Namibia. Now bring me full speed to you say the final what?
They call it the final solution.
The final solution,
which is what Hitler proposed. Hitler believes, unlike you, that all human beings, all humankind did not come from the heart of Africa.
I disagree.
No, I understand. But
he believed that until Jesse Owens went over there and crushed his chicanery under the heel of his foot.
Right. Well, Joe Lewis did the same thing, as you will recall. But that does not stop people from being delusionary. There are people who today, if you ask them, who happen to be white, did Donald Trump lose the election? They'll tell you with all the passion they can, no. They'll tell you that's rigged. So lies are something that's been going on. And when we get into
I want Santa Claus to come back. Since we all dreaming, can Santa Claus come back? Because I never got my G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip. Okay, I did get one.
So
it's sick. It's sick, big bro. You've been fighting this. First of all, Carl, Todd, welcome to the show. And I misspelled your name in the newsletter. I apologize. But I got to speak now. And you want to say hello to Mr. The Honorable?
Your Honor, good morning. How you doing?
Good morning, sir.
So I wanted to add to your story a little bit about Greensboro. So once Jeanette DeLude left Greensboro, she was the town manager who had hired the chief who hired the officer that killed Anton Black. She actually applied to be the city manager in Pocomoke City, and my council colleagues hired her. And under the leadership of myself and Miss Diane Downing, my council colleague, she did not last 2 weeks in Pocomoke City. We got her out of there.
Right. And Todd, would you also share with the audience that the police officer who was hired in Greensboro had been fired in another jurisdiction in Delaware for similar mistreating of Black people?
Right. So no background check had been done on this gentleman. They basically just hired him. They didn't bother to investigate his background. They didn't bother to even ask around because, it was public knowledge. And then the situation happened with Mr. Black, God rest his soul. And then Jeanette DeLude wanted to get out of Greensboro. She decided that she was going to move to Greenbackville, Virginia, which is right outside of Pocomoke. So I live right on the state line between Maryland and Virginia. And so I'm sorry. She came to Pocomoke. She applied. I did not vote to hire her initially. It was a 3-2 vote. And once people got wind of who she was and things like that, the community really came and they supported us, Black and white alike. To be completely frank, we were not in favor of her being the city manager in our town, and she resigned within 2 weeks. I don't even think, honestly, she might have just lasted a week and a half.
Yeah.
I'm from North Avenue, and all I can see, Mr. Carl, is visions of Leakin Park as y'all describing this story.
Right.
So you don't know about Leakin Park, do you?
That goes back to the T-shirt I'm wearing today. I don't play with the devil or his little friends.
They don't play with people at Leakin Park. They just wrap them up in a carpet and throw them in the woods.
And that has happened, unfortunately, too many times. And that's why I think that we're at a very serious time. That's why I'm so impressed with Todd offering himself up to public service for the Maryland House of Delegates. We need men and women who are courageous. These are times demand courageous people to be in public office.
How did you come across him, Mr. Snowden?
Say it again.
How did you meet Todd?
Oh, Todd, his uncle is the convener of the Caucus of African American Leaders on Maryland's Eastern Shore, and I was introduced to Todd by his uncle, who's also very active on Maryland's Eastern Shore. And one of the things we're trying to do with persons like Todd is really give young people a perspective on the history, so that they're able to take up this battle. We've got to pass it on from one generation to another. One of the things you had mentioned earlier, just so people understand where we are in 2022. In your city, Baltimore City, I saw a recent, very disturbing tape. It was done by WMAR television, and it was done in 1984. And the subject matter were squeezy kids. And the two people that were being interviewed at that time was the former councilman, Kwesi Mfume, and the former mayor of Baltimore City, William Donald Schaefer. And if one were to look at that interview back in 1984, some 37 years later, it is an interview that I think underscores field leadership. And it does it in such an incredible way. It just had these young boys who 37 years ago were 14 and 15 years old, talking about what life was like for them in Baltimore City. 37 years later, those young boys are now men who have children of their own, who some of those children are now the squeezy boys of this generation. We've got to break this up. It's unacceptable, it's unreasonable, and it's unnecessary.
Well, you can't just tease me about the interview. Can you give me a little more insight on what Kwesi said, what Schaefer said?
Oh, yeah. Well, Schaefer said it wasn't a racial issue. And this is the late William Donald Schaefer. This is when he's the mayor of Baltimore City. At the time, there was a vote that was taken in Baltimore City that created what they call a safe zone. It turned out all of the Black members of the city council voted for it. All of the white members of the city council voted against it. Even then, it was really a sharp, clear demarcation line drawn as it relates to race. And even today, as I've said to people, Todd, it's amazing how in Maryland, how quickly we forget. If you ask the average person who's watching this program, when was the last disturbance that took place in Baltimore City prior to Freddie Gray? Almost without exception, every one of them will tell you it was when Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered in 1968.
Wow.
But the truth of the matter is, that's not true. The last disturbance in Baltimore City was in 1979, 11 years after Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered. And most people who live in Baltimore City have forgotten all about the disturbance even took place. And if they were to listen to the press interviews of that day in 1979, the late William Donald Schaefer called the people who were involved in that civil unrest hoodlums and thugs. Exactly when Stephanie Rawlings Blake becomes mayor of Baltimore City, you have the Freddie Gray disturbance.
Obama called us thugs.
The mayor of Baltimore City, who was Stephanie Rawlings Blake at the time, referred to those young people as hoodlums and thugs.
And so did President Obama. But let me just put a point of clarification. There would have been no riots had then Police Commissioner Batts not closed Mondama's subway station without telling the students across the street at Douglas High School that the subway would be closed. The news reported the young people walking home as the rioters. Right. The major networks.
Well, that's the fact of the matter is, I'm sort of well familiar with Baltimore City's history. I know certainly many of the players in Baltimore City. And one of the things that people would be shocked to know, most people have no idea, for example, again, this is all recent history. There are two things that occurred during the what I like to refer to as the rebellion from during Freddie Gray. Two things occurred. Most people have no idea. One is for the first time in our nation's history, they used drones to cover a rebellion. It was the first time drones were used anywhere in the nation. Those drones not only recorded what occurred, but they also captured the images and names of people who later were prosecuted, by the way, after they put up this federal task force. And a lot of young
I
people.
wish they could do that for the slumlords and all of these vacant properties. I
Right.
wish they would put it to some functional use.
That was one thing they did. Another thing, Donnie, that they did that you should be aware of. If you ask the average person in Baltimore City this question, why was the curfew lifted in Baltimore City? Remember, Baltimore City had a curfew. And again, most people just don't pay attention to
I
history.
disagree.
It was,
Black Baltimore had a curfew because
well,
in the white part of town they were moving around like nothing happened, and it baffled me because I'm rushing to get back to the hood, and I'm looking around. I'm like, we the only ones going through this.
well, let me, my brother, sort of respectfully disagree with you because something happened in Baltimore City that had never happened before anywhere in the nation again. For the first time, Todd, if you're a baseball fan, in Baltimore City, there was a baseball game held with nobody in the audience at all. It was televised, but there was no audience because of this curfew that took place. That has never happened anywhere else in the country before. And there have been rebellions and disturbances, but it happened in Baltimore City. And when there was the curfew that was imposed, and this is what people don't want to hear, but it's true. When the curfew was imposed in Baltimore City, the curfew was from 10 o'clock at night until 6 a.m. in the morning. And the people who got the curfew lifted were the people who run the block. It's the people who are responsible for what Baltimore City calls nighttime entertainment.
I'm in love with the stripper.
Yeah, they said, "Are you crazy? You know how you're hurting us by having the city closed down between 10." And by the way, for people who are into knowing how the drug business work, those are the hours you make your most money, between 10 and 6 of the 10 a.m., 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning. And
You sure know a lot about Baltimore, Mr. Carl Snowden. Let me ask you this.
I lived in Baltimore, you know. Did you know that?
I'm going to ask you, this is going to clarify for me. Where was the best nightclub?
Well, there have been many. There once was a club called Eldorado's. There was one called Odell's. Odell's was on North Avenue, North and St. Paul Street.
What you know about Odell?
Well, I knew the owner, of course. I told you, Baltimore City was almost a second home for me. Perrin Mitchell was my mentor. I mean, Perrin Mitchell did a lot for me. A guy named Kenny Webster, who's no longer with us. Kenny Webster was a delegate in Baltimore City. He was responsible, Todd, for making Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a state holiday.
Wow.
Maryland was the second uh, state in the nation to make Dr. King's birthday a state holiday. The House bill number was 320, and every member of the Maryland General Assembly from Anne Arundel County, every delegate voted against making Dr. King's birthday a holiday, with the exception of one person, and that one person was the late Dr. Ernest T. Allen, who was the only African American that represented Anne Arundel County in the delegation. And
They got a highway named after him going towards the state house.
That is correct. And so for people, it's just so important for us to make sure that we understand the sacrifices that people have made and what those sacrifices have meant to our community. And Baltimore City is so full of potential.
Let me just shift gears for a second. Mr. Knock.
Yes, sir.
Anything you want to add to this discussion?
So absolutely. I want to first let Your Honor know that I actually met him back in 2015 when Chief Kelvin Sewell was fired. We were reintroduced a couple of years ago once the caucus came down to the Eastern Shore. But it is crucial to get people in leadership. Number one, it is okay for Black people to get into office, but we must know our history. We must know what we're fighting against. And, speaking about former Governor Shaver, he said that the Eastern Shore was
shit house.
Yes, exactly. So, we're not big fans of him down here on the Eastern Shore. That still echoes.
But he had property down there too, didn't he, Mr. Snowden?
All of them have property
Not,
down.
not only did he have property there on Maryland's Eastern Shore. In fact, I don't know whether Todd, you know this or not, but when William Donald Schaefer got elected as governor, do you know the two people he was running against?
I do not.
Got elected?
Steinberg?
Nope. The two people he was running against are both legendary Baltimoreans in their own right. One was Steve Sachs, who was a Maryland Attorney General, and the other was Perrin J. Mitchell. Perrin Mitchell ran for lieutenant governor on the same slate that Steve Sachs ran on. And he being the then mayor, Schaefer, was able to run a game that played heavily on race and anti-Semitism, and it worked.
I got some trivia for you. Who was the mayor of Baltimore, Honorable, in 1907? He is known as the father of segregation. George McMecken used to keep foot in his hind parts along with another Black lawyer named Ashby Hawkins. They named McMecken Street after George McMecken, but I understand in 1907, they had before you came about, you a reincarnation of Ashby Hawkins and George McMecken, Honorable Carl Snowden, but they used to hang foot in J. Barry Mahul. That was the mayor back there. You ever heard of him?
I have not. In fact, Baltimore City has a really rich history, and one of the things that I try to tell people all the time is the importance of knowing history. Do you know most people in Baltimore City don't know who Baltimore City is named after? Just as in my city, in Annapolis, if you ask somebody, who's Annapolis named after?
Well, pardon my English. I'm gonna try. Lord Baltimore, and he was from the Calvert family.
Yeah, Lord Baltimore from Baltimore City was named after. The city of Annapolis is named after a woman named Princess Anne, who later would become queen. Her father is the Duke of York. New York State is named after the Duke of York. Now, who's the Duke of York? He was the man that changed how slavery's done in America. He was the first one to come up with to take the initials and brand them on the bodies of human beings. Him and his daughter, who Annapolis is named after, made their money off human trafficking. They actually were involved in the slave business, where they would go and...
I gotta interject this, Mr. Carl. The Spanish and the Portuguese had been in the Americas at least a century earlier. So the British were the last of those European colonizers to come to North America.
Donnie, that's true, but it also is equally true that one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, particularly as it relates to slavery, they will tell you that there are other places in the world that enslave people, and it's true. But there's a reason they call American slavery the peculiar institution. And here's one of the things that made it peculiar. And it's hard to even say it now because it's a powerful indictment of this racist system. You each have heard, and your viewers have heard, the term MF. That term comes from the fact that slave masters would take the sons of women and force them to have intercourse with them.
Or they put a sack over the mother's head so the young man wouldn't know it's his mother?
No, they didn't have to do that. No. There was a huge fear system that was put in place where men were forced to do things they may not want to do. And I think if people ever really understood how terrible slavery was, we often take the notion that slavery took away people's language, which it did.
It took away their humanity.
Their humanity. But one of the things we've really not talked about, which is why critics and conservatives do not want critical race theory. Todd is a teacher, and he knows that in the classroom, you have a profound impact on young people. If young people really, white and black, by the way, really understood how cruel slavery was. For those who watched the movie called Roots, those 13 series of Roots, it did not capture what really slavery was about. Because remember,
but at that time, it was the first time that such a presentation had been made. Correct?
That is true. It is true. And I'm not taking anything away from Roots because remember, this was in 1977 when the series came on.
I have since heard that Mr. Haley did some plagiarizing.
Yeah. But before people, and that it's true, but it doesn't.
Why?
It doesn't take away from the original story itself. In fact, if people really read history closely, you find that that is not unusual. There are a lot of people who took credit. Here's something, Todd. Did you know that the current president of the United States, Joseph Biden,
is a slave owner?
No. He plagiarized. He took somebody else's speech and attributed it to himself and was forced, when he was running for president at the time, to drop out of the race. Not many Americans have forgotten that. He actually plagiarized. So when people talk about someone plagiarizing other people's work, it is not uncommon in America.
Todd, that's the worst thing you could do is steal somebody's stuff. I mean, as a writer, it's such a smack in the face to know of cats who actually get some rise out of it. I don't want nothing that's not mine. Man, who does that?
Being an English teacher right now,
Milli Vanilli.
Being an English teacher right now, there is no penalty for plagiarism anymore.
That's right.
There is absolutely no penalty for it. And these are the things that are infiltrating our schools. Parents are worried about their children learning the truth about racial injustices and things like that. But what they should be worried about is their kids learning that it is okay to steal, because that's what plagiarism is. It's stealing.
And if you lie, you steal, you cheat, you ain't no damn good.
And do you know that in America, documented, the Washington Post documented 10,000
got Haiti tuned in.
10,000 lies that Donald Trump has made. It's documented 10,000 lies that he has made when he was president of the United States. And yet he still has support among people who know he's a liar. It just goes to show you the times in which we're living.
So, Mr. Snowden, did you know that Denmark Vesey, now I know you like slave insurrection, and Daniel has just inspired me. So Denmark Vesey was down there in South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina. They built the Citadel because they were so afraid of Denmark Vesey. Because he had epilepsy, instead of being a field worker, they put him on a ship. And he would travel the world helping the owner pick slaves. And as he picked these slaves, he would pick up different newspapers from ports around the world. And he started reading, he started learning languages, and he's hearing different words. Bonjour, comment ça va, ça va bien. His hero was Toussaint Louverture, right there where Daniel's people from. Toussaint Louverture. Todd, do you know who Toussaint was?
I do not.
The most feared black man in the Western Hemisphere.
Well, and can I add a name, particularly for people watching the program? I'd ask them to Google this name. His name is Madison Washington.
Oh, yeah. I read his story.
Madison Washington.
I wrote about him. That was a love story.
Madison Washington literally freed more black people than Abraham Lincoln did. Most people don't know that. And he did it 40 years before. And you're talking about a brilliant black man.
You got to share the story of Madison Washington. Now, I was caught up with the love story because when he when he freed the ship, he found his wife, right?
That's correct. But what I
Okay.
want people to know about Madison, Washington is this. First of all, he freed more black people, literally freed more black people than Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln issued his Emancipation Proclamation that freed people who had no authority over. These were people in southern states who didn't recognize the United States at all. It'd be similar to the United States declaring that somebody in the Soviet Union is to be free. They don't
So a
have
lot of us missed that. The Emancipation Proclamation only applied to blacks in slave states.
That's correct. That's one. And the second thing that made Madison Washington such a brilliant man. I don't know whether any one of you have ever sailed a boat. Todd, have you ever done any sailing?
No, sir.
Have you, Donnie?
I went fishing with some white people down on Tillman Island, and I told them I was uncomfortable with that experience.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. You went to Tillman Island,
Yeah,
and went fishing.
He doesn't know the history of Tillman Island.
I know the history of Tillman Island.
But and you got back. But anyway,
I named Donnie Glover. You damn right I got back. They didn't want me down there, bro.
Things I wanted to mention.
They best wake up Frederick Douglass and Mr. Covey because they ain't want me down there.
One of the things about Madison, Washington, for those people who are watching who know anything about sailing, it's great skills. What Madison Washington was able to do, Todd, is he would watch those persons who were responsible for sailing the boat. They thought he was just one ignorant black guy, and he would be quiet and silent till he mastered the navigation. Can you imagine taking over a ship?
Wow.
That you've never before had the ability to navigate, and he had it down to a science. Took people safely, and he also did something, Donnie, that I hope you can appreciate. How many black people were fearful? You remember this?
Still today, black people still whispering when they say white people.
You remember the story about Harriet Tubman, where Harriet Tubman was trying to bring a group of slaves to, quote, freedom, including her brother. And her brother at the last moment got frightened because he knew that should they get captured, what would happen? So her brother, Harriet Tubman's brother, asked permission to go back to the plantation. And it was Harriet Tubman who said, "You will either be a free man or a dead man, but you're not going back." And she threatened to take his life.
Man, I saw a movie this weekend. It was a Western. They had this black man in there hugging this white woman. She freed him. And this big, burly Baltimore Ravens-sized black man, when everybody went away, he say, "Missy, I'm free. I don't want to be free. I want to." She said, "Well, keep it a secret. You still my slave." Let me tell you something.
But the thing about it is that is still true today.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
We still have people that are in bondage and they do not realize it. We still have people that, so to speak, kowtow when they're told to do something.
Buck dancing, step and fetch it. Yeah, we know them. And some of them are elected officials. They got prefixes before their name.
That's true.
Is we sick today, massa? Man, you imagine somebody trying to put a chain on me. I'm going to kill him as soon as I can. Poison. You enslave my family, my children?
Well, you're going to have a guest you said that's coming up.
I don't think she's coming.
Okay, well, let me share this with you then. And Todd, this falls right into why we need you in a leadership in the Maryland General Assembly. 2 years ago, a white delegate referred to black people as niggers.
Marianne Lasante, Harford County.
And the argument was that she should be expelled from the Maryland General Assembly. And African-American leaders who were members of the Maryland General Assembly were supposed to be outraged over what happened when the late Speaker, Michael Bush, who I know very well, said, "No, we don't want to expel her. We want to go with a sanction." The majority went along with that. Now, let's contrast that with something that happened in Baltimore City. That's why I was hoping the delegate would come on. When a white anti-Semite, wrote horrible things about Jews who worked for the then Baltimore City Public Works. The Jews who were on the city council, demanded that he be fired. He had civil service protection, all that, and he was fired.
Because we don't know. Just like when Biden, as vice president, said, he said to black people, they're going to put you back into slavery. He was talking about the Republicans. I was absolutely insulted. Todd, I will not forget the black woman who stepped at me and said, oh, I wasn't insulted. Negro, what?
Well,
Imagine Biden would have said to the Jews, don't vote for the Republicans. They're going to put you back in the ovens.
That's right.
They would have had his job by noon.
You know, the problem is that
We don't know when we've been insulted.
We don't know when we've been insulted, but that is why we as the people have to keep a tab on our elected officials. We have to be willing to support them because it's hard not to be bought. And Your Honor, you know, I'll say this all the time. I've never been for sale and I've never been bought, you know, but it's hard not to be. And that's a reality that we don't want to face. So it is up to us to support our elected officials. It is up to us to be in their ears. It is up to us to give them a call on the phone and say, hey, you know, that wasn't right. Hey,
no, right. We've got to hold them accountable. And the portrait of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. behind me, I truly do not believe that Dr. King or Malcolm gave their life so that we could put black people in the same position white people are in, to do the same thing white people do, steal and enrich themselves and that sort of thing. People who gave the ultimate sacrifice, their lives, whether it was Malcolm or Martin or somebody you've never heard of.
I'm not a fan of this Michael Eric Dyson guy because of all of the things he could find to write about Dr. King. It is mealy mouth man who ain't never sacrificed for our people that I know of. Go talk about Dr. King. You talk about one to go chase somebody down and take him out Lincoln Park. What has he ever done? Did he take a bullet for black people? Or did he just go on TV and run his mouth?
Well, that's why we have to hold black people accountable across the board. And when black elected officials, and I know people don't like to hear this, when black elected officials get indicted, get convicted for crimes, it is true that black people, that there's a double standard. But I'm not one to I don't lose a lot of sleep over that.
Hey, Todd, if you need some money, we'll do a fundraiser for you. Don't get caught. Don't go to jail over some jump change.
Exactly.
We could have did a fundraiser for you. Exactly. And here's something else. If you're going to get in office, you probably need your own money ahead of time. If you go into office broke, you are a vulnerable black elected official. That means somebody can slide a little money away, drop a little bag on your back porch, and you sell your mama down the street.
Someone who's held public office.
Not you, Todd.
And what I want to say to you, Todd, is someone who's held public office. Integrity is what you have to have. And integrity is not what you do when people are watching. It's what you do when they're not watching. And so
say that again. Say that again.
Integrity is what you do when people are not watching. And the truth of the matter is you either have it or you don't. And integrity is not something that you can give to someone. They have to earn it. So what I find for myself personally is that people have to make a decision, and they do it all the time. And so it's not a question of whether you, because we don't want a situation where the only one that get in the office are people who can afford, a certain lifestyle. We want all kinds of people to get in public office, but all we need them to do is have integrity. I met, and I tell people this story all the time because it changed my life personally. I met Rosa Parks. When I met Rosa Parks, some of you know that Rosa Parks was arrested in 1955. She was 42 years old, had never had any children, and was the mother of what they call the civil rights movement in that day. So I was fortunate enough in 1984 in Annapolis, Maryland, to meet Rosa Parks when she was living. She was then 84 years old. And I asked Mrs. Parks the question I always wanted to know. On that fateful day, why did you refuse to give up your seat? And the answer she gave me, I've never forgotten. Her response was, and she was a very diminutive, small-built woman. She said, because I refused to give up my dignity. That's powerful. It wasn't that she wanted to be seated next to white people. It wasn't that she was tired that day. She said, I refuse to give up my dignity. And
Mr. Snowden, we got to let this young man chime in. Todd, what does that mean to you when you hear this story?
Well, I've heard this story before, so I don't know if you paid attention, but every time Your Honor speaks, I actually pick up my pen. So I take notes when he talks, just in case I have to reference back to it one day. But what it means to me, that's how I live my life. I refuse to lose my dignity. I don't know if you can see the sign behind me, but it says integrity, and it is something that I always look for. It is something that I always think about. I like to tell people that while I do have a conscience, I still have my grandmother sitting on my shoulder. And I ask myself in many situations, would my grandmother like that I'm doing that? Would my grandmother like that I'm saying this? And that is the thing that will that keeps me in line. So when I look at a situation, even when it's time to vote, I ask myself, what would my mom say? And honestly, there have been situations where I didn't know what she would say. So I had to come and ask her. And I've had that privilege with my grandmother being 98 years old and still alive. But she sits on my shoulder, even in those council chambers, because my grandmother is a great woman of faith and integrity. She was a great woman of serving the community. She never held public office. She never had a fancy title, but she fed the hood. She clothed people's children. She paid people's bills. I always think to myself, what would my mom do? And the one thing that she always tells us, no matter what, keep your dignity. My fraternity said we have a poem that we like to quote. With my head held high, bleeding, bruised, and pale, it is the man who wins and fate defied, for he isn't afraid to fail. And that's how I live my life.
Honorable Snowden, have you ever heard a more powerful story than Frederick Douglass being sent to the quote-unquote nigger breaker, Mr. Covey, on the Eastern Shore, only for Mr. Covey to get his own damn back broke?
Yeah. What
is that not the most powerful story out the Eastern Shore?
It's one of the most powerful. There are other stories that does not have the same. It's not as well known. But there's a story that a guy told me, and Todd, you'll appreciate this. This takes place way before your time and mine, I might add. But this guy who is in his 80s now, he had a grandfather. And I was thinking what you were talking about when you talked with your grandmother. And in the old days on Maryland's Eastern Shore, Black men and women bartered their services. You didn't get paid. You would do, for example, raise fruits or they raise vegetables, and you get so much for every basket you raise. So if you, for the sake of this discussion, did a basket of tomatoes, you may get 10 cents. And remember, this is the era, the time they're living. So this Black man worked hard, collected all of these baskets, and he had his little grandson with him, who's this 80-year-old man now, who's telling me this story. And he takes this wagon full of tomatoes, and this white man counts tomatoes and deliberately gives a wrong figure for what he's earned.
Gentlemen, I actually have to log off. It was great talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So he winds up cheating the guy. And then remember, this is in the 40s. He's cheating the guy. Different world, different day. And according to this guy, his grandfather says to the white man, "Sir, you miscounted the tomatoes. You owe me more than that." The white man said, "Are you saying that I'm cheating you? Is that what you're saying, boy?"
You're damn right, boy.
And the Black man responded, "Sir, don't make me do something that you will be sorry for." And I love that story because it's so true. Don't make me do something you will be sorry for. And this guy knew that his grandfather wasn't playing, and the white man knew it as well, and he paid him what was owed him. Took great courage to do that in the 40s in a place called Maryland's Eastern Shore.
Tell me about the veterans, because as you tell that story, I think of Delegate Tiger Davis and the stories he's told me about when our soldiers come home from war.
Yeah,
Whether
well,
it was the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War One, our blacks came back from World War One and were lynched in uniform. But every time them soldiers came back home, their backbone was a little straighter.
Mac Parker, if you ever want to read about a heroic guy, his name is Mac Parker. Mac Parker was a black man who unfortunately faced racism just like you just described it when he came back home from war. And he was one of those soldiers, Mac Parker, that helped make the civil rights movement, that famous period of time where black men stood up. Oftentimes, when people think of black soldiers, they really don't know the history of black soldiers. When I tell people, for example, that a black soldier by the name of Perrin Mitchell got a Purple Heart, Perrin Mitchell served in the U.S. Army. When I tell people that Ron Dellums, he was a member of the service, armed services, he served. And this is the one that just blows people away. The co-founder of the Black Panther Party was Bobby Seale. Bobby Seale was a member of the U.S. Armed Services. He was in the Air Force. Black men who've gone into services, armed services, have often been construed as people who are very conservative. That's not always been the case. There have been black men and women who have served in the
Shout
army.
out to Cathay Williams, the black lady in the she's a Buffalo soldier, pretty much. Civil War.
Well, Harriet Tubman, as you know, also served in the military as a Union spy.
She was a Navy SEAL.
Right. But getting people to understand that we're living in a different era. One of the things you had said earlier about white women having children by black men or black men having children by white women, it is true. There's been this large increase of what's called interracial, biracial children that exist in this country. But it's also equally true that those people who are white supremacists hate that. And they're determined to change America. And I think that black people
Change it to what?
to an all-white country.
It's no such thing.
Well, they believe it.
Okay, where? Show me evidence of an all-white country.
Well, there are countries that exist that are pretty a majority white, overwhelmingly white.
I got you, but when I peel back the layers,
right.
Mother Russia, the father of Russian literature, was a black man, Alexander Pushkin.
That's right. And Donnie, I know that the history of black people transcends
all of that.
Yeah, I got that. But there does not mean that they're not people who hold a view, a perverted view of history. And they will try to establish this. Let's put it this way. This happened in your lifetime. This is not something that happened 30 years ago. This is your lifetime. In 2017, a white man walks in a church in South Carolina and shoots and kills 9 black people. And when asked by a judge, does he have any regrets? His response was, I didn't kill enough of them. That happened in 2017. In 2022.
See, they should have locked up him, his mother, and his daddy, and his grandparents. Locked them all up.
In 2022, this year, not 50 years ago, this year, in 2022, a white man, or not a white man, but it was a white man, excuse me, a white man.
This country wasn't all that damn white when they needed it built. That's the ignorant.
But he goes to Buffalo, New York. He tells the world that he carefully selected Buffalo, New York. It's not by accident he selected the grocery store he did. And he murdered black people. That happened in 2022. Now, here's the famous question that I want you to see if you can give a response to. And people watching this program. The famous question is, when it was Richard Nixon, when he was in the White House, the question was, what did the president know and when did he know it? That's a famous Watergate question. The question for Black America and Black people are the following. Now that you know that the racism exists, now that you know that people are threatening your life and the lives of your family and your children, what are you going to do about it?
I'm going to be praying and picking up a gun at the same time.
I know so many Black people, Donnie, who are in positions of power or influence or people on the streets that are not willing to answer that question. Just simply not willing to do it.
Harriet Tubman already told you, give me liberty, give me death. You stand on your feet, but I will not die on my knees.
Well, we need more people with that kind of attitude. Unfortunately,
a lot of us don't know there's a war. We're like frogs in a pot of boiling water. And we keep on giving the scorpion a ride across the river. And every time we do it, you ain't gonna bite me, are you? You ain't gonna bite me, are you? You ain't gonna sting me, are you? We get them all the way across like the elections. We get them all the way across the water, and they come out and say, okay, they sting you. We know, I hear a lot of us say, oh, white people know us, white people know us. And we know them too.
We do. And
better than anybody.
And our job, it seems to me, is to prepare another generation.
Isn't that great? Didn't Black women put breasts and nipples in these white babies' mouths?
Yes, there's no question about that.
Didn't we raise their children?
No question.
There are people telling us how to raise our children. What in the hell happened, Honorable?
Something called, and I know we're going to run out of time, but
no, we're not. This birthday, we share as long as you want.
Let me just share this with you in terms of Baltimore City. And I want people who live in Baltimore City to please pause and think about what I'm about to say to you. The crack epidemic hit Baltimore City like it did most cities across this country in the early 80s, and it lasted for almost a decade, a little longer than a decade. What the crack cocaine addiction did to Baltimore City, like it did to many, many cities, they brought two phenomena to Baltimore City. Now, the first phenomenon was the violence. You see the shootings that's going on today. Well, it was even more violent then. And here's what was happening. In places like Baltimore, Detroit, and other places, they used what was called kneecapping. Kneecapping was where a person would take a .357 caliber pistol or any kind of weapon and shoot a drug dealer purposely in his knees. Didn't want to kill him. Want to put him in a wheelchair so that so he would be a symbol daily for people who want to get into the drug business to know you could wind up in a wheelchair. And that phenomenon happened all over the country, and a lot of people wound up in wheelchairs because of that. But there was a second phenomenon that took place, and many people have forgotten this. There was a phrase that was coined during the crack epidemic. It was called crack babies. These were people who were born of crack-addicted mothers. And when the child was born, they literally had neurological, physiological problems. Not all crack babies died. Many of those crack babies would later grow up to be adults, have children of their own, and a lot of the issues that we're faced with today, I think you can directly trace back to that phenomenon. Now, Donna, here's something.
I got a phenomenon for you after this.
Do you know that there's not, of all of the various problems we've had in this nation, Johns Hopkins University is one of the most prestigious research institutions in America.
Yeah, but Black people are their number one specimen, so we ain't got a lot of regard.
But there's no study that's been done on what the impact has been with crack cocaine on Black families in America.
Well, I'm getting ready to tell you that, Honorable. There's another phenomenon going on. And I take it back to some of them old-timey lessons. When you go carrying poison.
When you do what?
When you go carrying poison.
Mm-hmm.
Crack cocaine, heroin,
right,
morphine, fentanyl.
Well,
when you go carry, hold up. This is my most profound statement. You know I can't compare it to you now. When you go carrying poison, it's bound to spill on you. What did they say in The Godfather? Give the dope to who?
That's right.
When I go and look in my alley, y'all knew it was coming. When I go look in my alley today, 7 a.m., I'm not looking for black crack addicts. You know who I'm out there looking for? White ones. When you go carrying poison, it's bound to spill on you.
Well, that's true.
Our neighborhood is inundated with addicts who do not match the majority demographic of Sandtown.
That is
That's
true.
the new phenomenon. It's called karma. Donald Trump and all of his hate, he might be starting a race war, but a good 25% of them are bona fide dope fiends.
I believe that, and I think you're right that what comes around goes around.
You damn Skippy, whose last shall be first.
History is replete with examples of that. But as we try to move our society to a better world,
we got to deal with that. We have not addressed racism. White people in denial. They don't even want to talk about history. They want to rewrite history. If you're so worried about what black people are going to do to you when we finally get on even footing, then why don't you stop doing cruddy stuff to black people?
Right.
Don't that seem simple?
Well,
That's
it is.
how you avoid ass whipping.
But also, Donnie, if people knew their history, you said it earlier. Do you realize that African American people, as a people, think of this. You cannot find in history where we took young white children that was given to slave mothers and they poisoned them. You won't find examples where uh, these black female slave nannies took white children and drowned them in wells. You just won't find that. We are very spiritual people. Our humanity speaks for itself.
Down here, these white addicts are begging from people in the 44th district. This is the most socioeconomically challenged district in the state of Maryland, and white addicts are down here panhandling.
Yeah, well, I think that speaks to a whole lot of issues, and one of the biggest issues it speaks to is what Dr. King once said in one of his famous speeches. Where do we go from here? Where are we going? Where are we as a nation going? How are we going to address?
I don't know. We sent billions over there to Ukraine, but I ain't seen a new recreation center in Baltimore City in my life, other than Greater Model.
Well, maybe that has to do with leadership coming out of Baltimore City more than what's happening at the national level.
We got all these black people in office. None of them are leaders, you're saying?
No, I'm not saying they're not leaders.
Where the new rec at?
You indicated that
the white people got a new football stadium and a new baseball stadium. Well, I claim the football stadium, but the baseball stadium, they got $20 hot dogs. I like the old baseball stadium up there on 33rd Street. But that's our lottery money from 73. They promised money. We got classrooms in Baltimore City with icicles in the wintertime. They close them in the warmer months because they don't have AC. How do you have two new stadiums, but your schools don't have heat and air?
It has to do with leadership. And again, leadership is not just people we elect to office. It's also people who hold people accountable. And if somebody is it's not bringing the bacon home, so to speak, or providing the services, it's time to remove them from public office. You vote your values and your principles. And if you don't vote your values and your principles, you get what you get, right?
Mr. Carl, what's the final thought for today? Thank you for teaching us.
Well, I appreciate it. And let me just tell you, Donnie, in a very serious way, I really appreciate what you're doing. People may take this for granted. They shouldn't. You're helping to open doors, give people an opportunity to hear voices that they normally wouldn't hear, and more importantly, giving the perspective that's needed. More than ever before, we need independent African American journalists and opinion makers like yourself who are willing to ask the tough questions, who are willing to get the slings and arrows. Because you've made some comments even today. I'm sure that there are people who didn't appreciate you raising the question about their leadership skills, but you understand that's not important. Your voice have to be heard. It's got to be unfiltered, and you got to tell it like it is, and you're doing that. And I thank God for you and your service. And I say to your viewers, your best days are ahead of you. We have not seen anything yet. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you for teaching me how to box lefty.
God bless.
We've been fighting on the right. We got to learn how to go left.
Yes, right.
Good morning, world. Happy 20th anniversary, BeMoreNews.com. The news before the news, where we uncover